you. Good morning. We are at a very powerful intersection, and there's a lot of thinkers and leaders, doers here in this room. So I recognize the investment that everyone's making, and we're going to make it useful. So hopefully during this time, we'll agree, we'll disagree, we'll find new ideas here that we could put into place immediately in any given portfolio, economy, or geography. Alex Cruzo with Telesto Strategy, we work to help accelerate and connect climate capital on the African continent. I'm joined to you today by a powerful group of different leaders, investors, people representing philanthropy, DFI, people on the ground with their own companies. We'll have a lot to learn. I'll also look to the audience to get involved. So please start thinking of your questions, and we'd like to hear from you all and learn from each other, especially taking advantage of a breakout session here. Why not roll up our sleeves a little bit? So like I said, this is a very powerful intersection. Not only is fintech and Africa at this sort of really exciting period in its trajectory of growth, and some are calling it not only a disruption, but an eruption of activity. But we're also seeing a historic inflow of climate capital and climate financing and a major global push towards decarbonization and the advancement of the SDGs. So all of those questions come together under today's breakout session. How does fintech play a role in advancing the SDGs? So there's a lot here we can unpack. I have a lot of questions for this panel, and I'm looking to, again, for questions and answers from everyone here today. How we'll do this is I'll go first with ask our esteemed panelists for a very, very brief intro. Who are they? Who are they with? Where are they working? And what are some of, again, how do they touch this question of fintech, climate tech, SDGs in a couple sentences, and then we'll dig in from there. So I'll start to my right.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jackie Ugokwe. I am the Senior Community Manager for Goalkeepers at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Goalkeepers is the foundation's group of change makers working across the globe, taking action towards helping us achieve the SDGs by 2030. And just from that statement alone, you can see where my intersection sort of comes into play here. I really work with people across Africa, across Asia, across Europe as well, who are really taking that action, and building towards and creating solutions towards helping us achieve the SDGs. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I am Jacqueline Musitwa, and I am the Senior Climate Finance Advisor at USAID. USAID is doing a number of things within development, but my portfolio in particular is focused on mobilizing $150 billion of public and private capital for climate actions around the world by 2030. Some of the ways that we plan to do that is through supporting partner governments with regulatory reform to help improve their ability to attract money, for instance, through development of carbon markets, green bond, and other types of bond markets, so basically development of capital markets. We also have a number of products that we end up supporting, both from an interagency perspective, but also with other partners, so blended finance, for instance, where we do dedicate an amount of grant funding and pool and mobilize capital from other partners. The other way that we are looking to get to this target, but ultimately impact climate finance to developing and emerging markets, is working to convene the different players within the space, whether it is at a central bank level, ministries of finance, and really getting the right people in the room to make decisions about how they might impact not only financial systems, but more importantly, greening those financial systems. I'll go ahead and stop there, and I welcome the questions after. Thank you.
Hi, all. My name's Dan Block. I'm a partner with Mercy Corps Ventures. We're an early stage venture fund that invests in resilience for underserved individuals and communities across emerging markets, but with Africa as our largest and most significant focus region. And we've made about 50 investments to date. And really, as we look at resilience, we look at it through two pillars, one around financial resilience and the second around climate resilience. And inevitably, there's a lot of overlaps between the two of them. And I guess what we'll get into on this panel is, for us, where those two do overlap in the middle of the Venn diagram is where we look to find synergies and have built out quite a strong thesis, I think, and a growing portfolio in that space. So, yeah.
Good morning. My name is Arinze Ike Abiakam. I'm the CEO and co-founder at the company AgDynamics, Agric, and what we are is we're building a technology platform to optimize the export commodity supply chain. So basically all the export commodity coming out of sub-Saharan Africa. We're building a platform that allows international buyers and off-takers to be able to get the commodities they need at scale. And then on the supply side, for small-scale farmers, small-scale aggregators and suppliers, to allow them or to create capacity for them to be able to meet that demand. So access to markets for them. Where what we're doing intersects with climate and finance, that's actually what I'm here to find out, right? In this conversation, we're going to unravel that and figure out how does it, like Africans on the ground and that are in the front lines, right? How does the climate capital affect them and how can they utilize that while still generating revenue and maintaining their fiduciary duty to investors? That's my company. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name's Ami Parbu. I'm managing partner of Axion Venture Lab. We are an early stage fintech fund, so we invest in inclusive fintech companies serving underserved consumers and small businesses globally. So we're a global fund with Africa as a core priority region for us as well. We've been investing for the last decade, made over 60 investments. And yeah, this intersection between climate and fintech is something we've been spending a lot more time and getting a bit more granular about what our thesis is, what models we want to see. Largely, we focused in the ag space and thinking about climate resilient agriculture. But really, financial services, as we'll talk about, is such a foundational element to making climate work for populations on the continent. How you make new technologies more affordable, and that's really what we're quite excited about.
Ami, thank you. That's a great segue. I'd love to dig into that, and maybe we'll start with the investors that we have represented in the panel. Tell us more of what you see as some of those key trends as more and more of this, the fintech companies of Africa are making plays in climate and that intersection. So Dan, maybe I'll hand it over to you first.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think, to take a little bit of sort of a step back, maybe 5-10 years ago, you thought of fintech really as being a sector and a vertical, and I think more and more we're seeing across markets, across sectors, fintech is much more of a horizontal, and it's an enabler for all sectors. It's a critical component in terms of embedded finance solutions to facilitate everything from education to ag to energy, and so. Yeah, I want to maybe just give a couple of examples of how we're seeing that play out sort of more specifically. There's 4 sectors in particular, I think that are good examples of how we're seeing fintech being used to accelerate climate solutions. The first is around insurance and risk transfer. Second in Web3, third in e-mobility, and the fourth in adapted agriculture and nature-based solutions. And maybe I'll just kind of run through and give a couple of examples of what we're seeing in each. But in the first bucket in insurance, we've invested in in 3 companies that are using climate index insurance to be able to provide more rapid and high quality payouts to farmers to be able to weather the storms of droughts and of actual physical climate storms. one of which is working B2G, a company called Pula. Second, which is working through leveraging mobile money through a large telco in Francophone Africa called Oko Finance. And then a third company that's actually doing the risk assessment around flood risk for cities, urban areas, as well as rural areas, called Floodbase, and using that risk assessment to be able to provide early warning systems for humanitarian organizations, for governments, as well as to be able to price in catastrophic risk insurance for reinsurers to be able to sell products that allow governments or larger regions to be able to respond to the effects of climate change, and to be able to do so quickly after climate events. The second in Web3, I'll just give kind of a couple examples so as not to take too much time, but there's a company we've invested in called Topple, which is providing a traceability solution on blockchain. It's a layer one solution you think of similar to like an Ethereum, but what they've done is they've designed the solution to be extremely data light, to be able to work in remote areas, even in data light areas, or even in areas that don't have any connectivity, and to be able to sync afterwards, and creating a traceable solution that allows individuals in ag value chains, in coffee, in commodities, to be able to see in a trustless way full traceability of products directly from source all the way through to end consumers. Then in e-mobility, we just made our first investment in an electric vehicle company in West Africa that's providing basically a battery as a service solution, leveraging the potential of electric to be able to not only facilitate access to mobility at lower costs, but also to see that battery as a way to provide a level of resilience and support to energy systems, which, as we all know, are improving but are still quite fragile and fragmented in many parts of the world, including in economies in Africa. And again, leveraging the ability to do pay-as-you-go and to build credit scores through that, to be able to provide financing to gig workers, to whole value chains that are dependent on mobility. And then the last in ag and nature-based solutions, just wanted to highlight one company we invested in recently that's looking at the potential for irrigation to allow smallholder farmers to mitigate the effects of climate risks, of droughts and water inundations. And I think one of the things that's well known in the ag space is that access to irrigation can significantly be a step change growth in terms of incomes and yields for farmers, but it's just fundamentally inaccessible for most of them because of the cost of the capex. And so this company called Stable Foods has built a networked irrigation system that allows for multiple farmers, up to 50 different farmers, to leverage the same central pool of water reservoir, and then to be able to distribute that cost back to the farmers, so that they can, again, pay as you go, and for as little as $1 a month, to be able to access irrigation for small parcels of land. So.
Thank you, Dan. That really sets the stage nicely and is a very rich description of some of the things that are happening on the ground. Ami, I'd like to hand it to you next. Maybe more qualitatively, what surprises you about your work day to day on the ground with your portfolio at this intersection?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, this intersection of climate and fintech isn't new, right? I mean, if you look at the continent, pay-as-you-go solar was something everyone was investing in a decade ago. Really, the innovation came from Africa at this intersection point. And I think pay-as-you-go technology has now evolved into all kinds of other spaces. And so there's always been a conversation around, to Dan's point, financial services as that horizontal across different sectors, including in climate. I think for us, one thing that surprises me in a positive way is, we've been taking a step back to say, okay, what exactly is our investment thesis in this space? And I'd really recommend our colleagues at the Center for Financial Inclusion put out something called the Green Inclusive Finance Report at the end of last year. And it really, I think, for us, fundamentally shifted what we wanted to focus on in this space. The paper and the research they do really talks about what are the different impact pathways that financial services can have in climate, climate shocks, in climate change. And they describe, these 4 different pathways, one being mitigation, another being around adaptation, resilience, and then transition. And I think what it framed for us was that so much of the investment dollars and innovation has so far been focused on mitigation. And that's an important part, especially in this part of the world, for us to be thinking about. But when you're looking at a lot of the markets we work in across Africa, across other emerging markets, these are parts of the world that haven't contributed to climate change in the same way, to carbon emissions, but are the most impacted by their effects. And so for us, we've kind of reshifted to think about what models, what investments do we want to make to help drive climate resilience. And Dan used this term as well. I think we all are sort of thinking about this space of saying, not just how do we mitigate the impacts, but how do we say, if someone is going to be, if a low income or climate vulnerable population is going to be now, their livelihood is going to be destroyed by the climate shocks around them, how can we better protect that with insurance? How can we better develop incentives and create climate smart livelihoods for them? And so I think, without giving kind of specific examples, that's been a little bit of the reframing for us to say what we want to go out and look for. Again, agriculture becomes a really big focus, continues to be, and curious to hear, Ike, more about your business. I think that becomes a natural piece that is really affected by climate change.
Thank you, Ami. And that's a really nice place to bring in Ike. I was thinking about you next as someone on the ground. We'd love to hear more about your business. And what are some of those day-to-day challenges trying to demonstrate, again, financial results to shareholders and thinking about broader impact that you're looking to have?
So we say that in Africa, every business eventually becomes a fintech, right? So fintech and financials is very important in African business. And then when you talk about climate, whenever people talk about climate, they talk about almost a changing customer behavior, right? Reduction of carbon emissions and things like that. But like she mentioned, in Africa, you're talking about people who haven't participated at all in this climate situation that we have. So how do you even begin to have that conversation? And to me, the way I'm seeing it is there needs to be a shift in that conversation, in that instead of asking people to change their behavior, remember, this behavior has not contributed to the problem at all. Instead of asking them to change, but we have an opportunity to use fintech solutions, right? Resilient solutions to build infrastructure, right? That is climate responsive, that is climate resilient, but is also beneficial in creating values for these communities, right? So that sounds like a lot of things that I said, but I'll give you an actual example. So in my company, what we do on the supplier side is we give them, we improve their capacity to be able to aggregate, whether it's from farmers, small-scale aggregators, suppliers. They can do maybe 1 ton, 2 ton, but we come in and we partner with them and we increase their capacity so that they can fill a big order from an international buyer. So we constantly get people approach us, oh, we need this, we need to supply this, and that's not a problem. We were approached by a community and, it was like 12 women. They're like, yeah, they farm rice. And we looked at it, and it's very interesting. I think I told you this story, Dan. And we're like, yeah, 12 women, we're sure we're gonna give you guys money so you can farm more. And we did that, and then 500 of them came, right? And they're like, listen, we can do this at scale. And it got very interesting. And when you're now going to fund 500 women farmers to increase their capacity, we now looked at the processing, right? And we found out that the processing plant in that area was literally non-existent, right? So if you're going to increase their capacity, you now have to invest in that infrastructure so that we can carry the new capacity, right? So when we looked at it, so instead of building an old diesel engine rice processing mill, right, we decided to build a solar and gas-powered processing mill. And by the time we're done, it's probably going to be the first of it in the entire nation. So during the day, it's powered by solar, and at night, it uses natural gas. So to me, right, that's the kind of example of how this intersection can work in Africa. Because if you're coming in that community and telling them that they have to shift how they do business, like they don't even have power. The carbon footprint from my flight from Lagos to here is more than their carbon footprint for a year. So, but I think there's an opportunity now for us to build new structures, right, that are climate aware, right? Build new structures that are climate aware, but also create value in these communities and these neighborhoods that continue to make them resilient, continue to create value for them. Because like I told you, that's the only way they're going to listen to you when you say, oh, do this differently. But if you're coming in and you're telling people how to mitigate or change their behavior, they don't even understand what you're trying to accomplish. So that's an opportunity for us. And when we saw that, obviously that's going to cost money. And that's where the fintech is going to come in, because we can't do that alone. But the people we're talking to, they see that this could be an amazing model, because literally there is no rice processing plant in the entire country, and I suspect maybe across the continent, that is solar and gas powered. So that's kind of some of the opportunities that we're seeing in that area.
Thank you for sharing that, Ike. Yeah. I am reminded too, but what came up at the U.S. Africa Leaders Summit quite strongly from the AFC, we have to remember that there's also a narrative issue. Africa's not the problem, solution.
Yes.
We're reminded that it's the carbon sink globally. And so we're right to call out things about overstressing potentially mitigation when there's other pathways too. So Ike, you also talked about need for capital inflows. We happen to have DFI Philanthropy on our panel too. Why don't we turn to them? Maybe Jackie, I'll start with you next. Tell me, two things. What's working really well? What are some of the highlights you'd like to showcase on the ground? And for those potentially in the room or at the summit who'd like to work with a foundation, what are some of those requirements?
Yeah, sure. And I love hearing everything that everyone's talked about so far. I think the cool thing about fintech is that it cuts across multiple SDGs. Climate, goal 13 is climate action. Goal 13 is one of them. And, an interesting case study I was reading recently and looking at the foundation was a community in Uganda was provided digital wallets to over 300,000 people, and they were able to raise $10 million over 2 years to help support to help support the risks that come with climate change and displacement and being people moved, whether it's floods or erosion and things like that. And I thought that was just a cool small thing. You think about it, it's like a digital wallet. We're all so used to our phones and the things that we do and how easy it is to sort of bank online and to save online. And that, that specific little tool was able to push them to really create this fund that's a good safety net for them in their community. I think one of my favorite examples, really, when I think about that intersection of fintech and climate, is around food security. We know that there's a food crisis, on the continent, and when you're thinking about agriculture investments, I can sit here on my phone in DC and invest in climate resilient grains, my favorite one being fonio, sort of grown in West Africa, or acha as we call it in Nigeria. And you can sit here and, from DC, sit here and invest in sort of the pre-harvest, the harvest, and the processing part of, products like that are superfoods that will literally, play a huge role in helping us sort of come over this, the food security issues. And when I think about the foundation and some of the things that we look at and the work that we support, the partners we work with, the grantees that we work with, I think the big themes really is how are we supporting products or solutions that are really getting into the hands of the people who need them the most? I think one of the big things the foundation really sort of prides itself on, it has the privilege to work on, is also in the R&D phase, because a lot of times it's going to take time to come up with these really cool scientific, innovations, and a lot of times people want to sort of jump to the end and have that final product, but you really have to invest in that beginning phase. And how do you really focus on sometimes the science or the technicalities behind some of these solutions that we're looking to provide. So, yeah.
Thank you, Jackie. And I'd love to turn it over to Jacqueline next from USAID's perspective. Tell us more about your portfolio, what's working well on the ground, and again, same question for those who might be interested in partnering with USAID, what are you looking for?
Thank you. No, this has been fascinating because we actually work across where all of my fellow panelists are. At the macro level, we do support governments with legislative reform, as I mentioned before. So whether they are looking to tap into carbon markets, which right now is one of the areas of highest demand that we're receiving from African governments, or whether they're saying, we are trying to increase our own, change our industrial policy so that we can be better suited to manufacture renewable energy technologies. So that's one area where USAID is very effective and has a lot of experience. We also have experience and appetite to support entrepreneurs that are in a pilot stage. And so please, for those who are interested, for those who are looking for grant funding, for those who are looking for first loss, check out usaid.gov. And we do have a specific section that, one, tells you how to work with USAID. It can be a bit complicated, so be patient and be sure to go through all of the detail. But two, we do offer funding across the continent for a lot of the technologies that we've mentioned today. I think some of the areas of interest are climate information systems, and really trying to link the aspect of predictability, but also the ability to link to fintech. And if you look at the Vice President's recent trip to the continent, we are very proud about the $7 billion that was announced related to climate resilience and adaptation, because we do recognize that imbalance of the amount of financing that goes to mitigation rather than adaptation. And so from a USG perspective, there is a coordinated effort starting at the White House through the PREPARE initiative, which is the President's initiative focused on resilience and adaptation, and some of the agencies like us that are looking to work with different partners in the private sector to get everyone together that is focused on adaptation, find solutions that work particularly on the continent, and find ways to scale that up, not only in Africa, but in different parts of the world. So I think as you think of USAID, think of us as kind of a double partner. As an investor, we're there to help make investment climates in countries more acceptable, so you can invest in those countries, but equally in countries where you are investing, we are happy to partner with you to scale up solutions that ultimately have impact on the ground. The last thing I'll say is about impact. We are especially keen to see the following. Impact on women, historically underrepresented people, indigenous people. We're equally looking at the intersection of not only climate finance, but reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, protection of forests, protection of sustainable landscapes as well. So we're really looking at the holistic aspect of climate and making sure that, we as a development agency are able to provide not only financial support, but equally impact support within the climate space.
Thank you, Jacqueline. Very helpful, and I hope practical for many looking to develop more partnerships with USAID and others on the panel. Given time, why don't I ask and see if anyone from our audience would like to jump in? Does anyone here have a question for our panel?
So what is climate finance, or what is not climate finance?
From our perspective, money that is going to, we put it broadly as adaptation and mitigation. So if you are a company that, for instance, is working on solar, and you approached us with a business proposal, we would probably work with you through our Power Africa colleagues to make sure that that is funded, and would be looking for, is your company, is your product able to scale within the African continent? We also look at, for instance, guarantees. So on a kind of other de-risking mechanism. If you are a financial institution that looks to offer guarantees, we recently, for instance, offered a guarantee through our colleagues at Prosper Africa. So I think it really depends on what you're doing, but the main kind of focus is anything that relates to us decreasing the climate impact and making people whose lives are getting increasingly harder because of climate impact, to make them just more able to adapt and able to, basically able to thrive. So what I haven't mentioned is because of the different vulnerabilities, we do have different initiatives, for instance, in the Sahel that are very focused on the challenges within the Sahel region, or Horn of Africa that are mostly focused on kind of agricultural adaptation. We do have a localization strategy, which means that every country comes up with the solutions that work best for their particular context, and then we really respond to those. And so if you are based in, I don't know, Congo, Brazzaville, for instance, it would be a matter of engaging with the mission there and finding solutions and funding directly for the missions, but making sure that that solution is really catered to the challenges in Congo-Brazza in this instance. I think what we've learned in the past from the development context is we can't come up with solutions here in Washington, D.C. and put them over there. And so it really is making sure that locally within the countries we operate in, that we get the demand from there. Something I should mention about localization is that our goal is that by 2025, 25% of USAID funding will actually be given to people on the ground in the countries we operate in. By 2030, the goal is to get to 50%. And that would mean that a company like Ike's that is operating in Nigeria will be able to apply for funding directly to the USAID mission in Nigeria, and they would be able to work with him directly, not only on funding support, but also support with respect to technical assistance and also de-risking. And really, it really just depends on whatever areas of support that are within our toolkit. And whatever is not within our toolkit, I think it should be mentioned, we are able to work across the U.S. government to find solutions. So whether it is U.S. EXIM, U.S. TDA, I think look at us as an entry to USG, and we will be able to help with whatever your challenges are within the financing space related to climate. Thanks.
Thank you. Given our time, I'll go back to the panel with just, before our lightning round question, just one final question to our investors on the panel. What's the next big thing? Maybe a couple sentences, and then we'll go to our lightning round.
Yeah, I mean, I would say I think I think we're looking at similar to what we were talking about with fintech, as being a vertical and sort of transitioning into a horizontal. I think we're still looking at climate right now as being a bit of a vertical, and then even separating out mitigation and adaptation. And I think a lot of the most transformative solutions are both mitigation and adaptation. And I think we're getting to a point as well where the idea of is this a climate solution, or does this have a climate angle or not, is going to be 5 years from now something that's kind of irrelevant. You can't the effects that climate are going to be having across our societies, across the economy, across the way cities and economies are structured is such that every company is going to need to be a climate company. Every company is going to need to be looking at every fintech company is going to need to be looking at what are the climate risks and what are the climate opportunities. And I think that's maybe it's not one thing, but I think that's in an overarching way. The way a lot of the discussion around climate as a sector is gonna shift into climate as a lens or as a theme that cuts across.
Yeah, I mean, a couple of things we're quite excited about. I mean, we as a fund have been doing a lot of investing in supply chain financing, fintech solutions that are looking at, how you really embed yourself in relationships between suppliers, buyers, however that might be suited in agriculture or logistics, whatever it might be. And so I think we're really excited about what are kind of climate resilient supply chains, and how do you kind of enable that, through fintech solutions. So that's one piece. I think we're just scratching the surface on insurance, and ways in which not only products are designed and data is used to better protect against climate shocks, but also how it's distributed. We're co-investors with Mercy Corps in Pula, and I think really the power of what they've done is how they've built relationships and bundled insurance with other offerings to make it free for end customers. So solutions that are thinking about that in insurance, I think, will be really interesting. And then just in general, climate resilient livelihoods. And I think, thinking about ways in which you are creating income generating opportunities in this new world.
Thank you, Ami. And our final lightning round question, in one sentence, no more. There can be some harsh headlines, and we're hearing some doom and gloom, obviously, when it comes to climate and some of the disproportionate effects in Africa. What keeps you going? What's most exciting for you about this work?
One sentence is tough. Okay, I'm really excited about the growth. I think that it's great to see the energy and the attention and the money being pushed towards Africa. I'm excited to see in the next 2 to 3, 5 years what the R&D phase that we're in right now, what that leads to. I'll pause there.
I'm excited about the U.S. commitment to investing and working with Africa on climate solutions, whether it's at a government level or a private sector level. Just last plug, please check out Prosper Africa website. There are opportunities there, as well as development innovation ventures on USAID. We are looking for great solutions that are focused on Africa, so please apply. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, for us, what keeps us going is the entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs like Ike, entrepreneurs, across our portfolio and others out there that are, not looking with a lens of how can I map what I want to do to an SDG or to a policy initiative, but are starting with where there are problems that they can drive real solutions for on the continent with their own lived experience, with their own networks and with their own resources, and being able to support them in their vision to innovate, to solve the continent's challenges and to scale, whether it's in climate or or other adjacencies, is really what excites us and what we live for.
So for me, this is it's more than a one-sentence question, but I'll try, right? What keeps me going is, this is my second venture in Nigeria now, and when you start working with people, the moment where they get it, the moment where they get how the technology can change their lives, or how it can improve, right? And they just take it and they run with it in ways you can't even imagine, right? And then it's starting with what she's talking about and what Dan is talking about. I'm starting to see, or we're starting to see this network effects of solutions and technology and how they're starting to build. Like when you talk about climate resilience, climate capital, right? She talked about wallets, which is interesting with that story I told. What happens now is that community, when you create digital wallets, they can adopt it. And if they can adopt it, that means funding can go directly to them, whether it's coming from me, whether it's coming from her, right? And when you come into that community and you've changed their livelihood, you've created value for them. When you now want to have a conversation about climate resilience, about new technology, they will listen because they actually have seen value created for them. So what I'm excited is about the new infrastructure and the new structures and new solutions that will be built as we continue this conversation.
Yeah, I echo that. I mean, I think we're early innings on climate resilient solutions, and the real power will come when we figure out how you create incentives, whether that's lowering costs, creating new income generating opportunities for people to adopt these new technologies. Until then, I think a lot of money is going to be pushed into this, but it's not really going to stick. So I think we're really excited to see innovations around that.
That's a wonderful place to end. I know we're at time, so please join me in thanking our panelists for today, and I look forward to making connections between everyone here. So thank you.